Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Oh boy, a bit of a false start there, but we're good to go. Make sure my microphone's working properly here. Having microphone issues. You know, it wouldn't be my show if something didn't go wrong, right? If everything went as smoothly as possible, I think I would wonder what in the world was going on. Why is the world conspiring with me now? So I'd be worried. Anyway, welcome. I am your host, Duck. This is, once again, Learn Photography with Duck. And today is our, where are we? Let's go to the title, Photo Q&A. Wrong one. Photo Q&A. All right. Just to give you a little update. I got confirmation that my desktop computer that's coming here to the studio shipped out, and it should be arriving at my house tomorrow. So that means for the next week or so, I will be updating that, transferring over all the software. I'm doing the same thing at home with my laptop, and I'm already encountering some problems. So hopefully the studio computer will transfer over easily enough. I'll make sure that I get the appropriate Lightroom and Photoshop transferred over. Okay, we got all kinds of people. Lihia from Kentucky is joining us once again. Thank you so much. Brian's here. Fred, Long Wharf Marketing.
Yeah, I'm logged into my work account, not my personal. Didn't know it till I got in the room.
That's all right. Bob. And Diet Pepsi. Diet Pepsi? Really? Not Diet Coke? Coke Zero? Them's fighting words. All right. Anyway, today is our Q&A session. But I want to start off just kind of explain a little bit something that I talked about at a previous session about workflow. And I just want to kind of expand on that a little bit because I had a conversation with some people, and while they understood the gist of it, there were a couple things that they mentioned that made me think that says, oh, I think maybe they're not thinking in, the right way about it. Plus also I did the session with Milford Photo on Beyond the Rule of Thirds, and some good questions came up there that kind of touched a little bit on what I'm going to be discussing today. So, and that is the progression of your workflow as your skill level gets better and better. The more tools you have in your tool belt, obviously, the more ability you have in bringing your images to a higher level. And one of the things that that the beginner the beginning photographer struggles with is discovering their workflow, which is understandable because, as the saying goes, you don't know what you don't know. And it's not until either somebody points it out or, you pick up a little bit of information here or there. And for me, what I found is that I would pick up information, and it would be this little piece that I just did not know where it fit. All right. So being able to either have somebody tell me where it fits in, or if I saw it, usually in a video, If I saw somebody else using that little bit of information and I analyzed it and I saw exactly where they used it, it gave me that aha moment. All right. But oftentimes what I also find is that there's this confirmation, all right, as I'm struggling along and, making things up along the way. And if I saw somebody else doing the same thing, it would give me that confirmation as, okay, I am doing it right. So it kind of takes that doubt out of the process. But one of the things that I discussed last time was that your workflow is going to morph and modify as your experience level builds. Again, the more you know, the better, the product is going to be. And the more experience you get, the more you'll realize that you start rounding out your workflow, and it's no longer about where do these things fit in this timeline of a workflow, but more of how can I fine tune these things that are already in my workflow, which is a great place to be, because then you have enough of an ability to get a really good product out, and you're not struggling with that whole learning process. Okay. But to take it further, and one of the things that I want to discuss today is that as your experience grows, what you need to do is you need to consider the workflow that you're doing with your editing and the workflow that you're doing out in the field, because one is going to what's the term? Influence. One is going to influence the other. So, for example, one of the things that I learned early on when I switched over to digital was especially when I went from my first digital camera, which was JPEG only, and I moved into a RAW camera. I noticed that I had a lot more leniency with my exposure using a RAW file, but it was different than what I was used to back in the film days. In the film days, I could recover a lot of my highlights, whereas with digital, you have to be careful how you capture your highlights. I found I was able to recover my shadows a lot easier than my highlights. And now I've come to learn that, there's this fine balance between getting got to watch my terminology here. It's not necessarily the right exposure, but the proper exposure for the end results that you're getting. Because a right exposure may not be the correct exposure needed in the post-processing part of your workflow. And understanding what you can and can't do in the post-processing, especially after a while when you start discovering that you have a certain way or a certain technique of editing your images, and that comes again with experience. When you get past I just want to make it look proper to I want to give it a wow factor. Once you start introducing that wow factor, you're going to find that you're struggling against what you're doing out in the field. And oftentimes what happens is you'll be sitting at the computer and you'll be looking at the image that you thought was fantastic and go, man, if I only had done this. All right. And that's the key thing that you now have to start looking for, is what are those little things that you wish you had changed? Okay. one of the things that I often suggest, and those of you who've been following me long enough probably heard me say this. Every once in a while, go back, in your history of your images and take a look at those images that you shot 3, 4, 5 years ago and re-edit it and see where your skill sets have progressed to the point where you may have struggled or you may have settled for a way of editing a particular image back then, where now you have a little bit more experience and maybe you're seeing your images in a different light. You open them up and now you're seeing your progress through your own editing process. And that's where you can discover these little tips and tricks. It's like, man, I should have done this. And the more that you recognize those should haves, the easier it becomes to take care of it out in the field when you go out to shoot. Because you're always, when you're editing and you come up with those, it's being put into your brain. Oh, I should have done. When you hear enough of those, when you're out in the field, you catch yourself, and bad habits are hard to break, but you catch yourself hopefully and you say, oh, this is the point that I've been struggling with. Every time I edit, I always kick myself because I should have done this. So here I am, time to change it. And this is where your workflow shifts, it modifies, it gets enhanced, it goes to that next level. Okay, so that's what I mean by your workflow is always going to be changing and expanding, as you grow. You learn it. So depending on where you are with your shooting and your editing, okay, if you're struggling beginner, you got to give yourself a little bit of leeway, and don't hate upon yourself so much, because it will get to you, it will come to you, but you got to start and really analyze the areas that you're having problems with, okay, and then just work on those. All right, so what are some of the tips that I can give you if you're struggling? One of the things that I learned when I was shooting film that helps me out today is write things down. All right, if back in the film days, and those of you who shot film know this, you had your camera, you had your rolls of film, and you had a notepad. And that notepad was to keep track of all your exposure settings. All right, I used to write, the frame number, what the subject was, or maybe a brief description of what I was shooting, so that way when I compared it to what comes back from the lab, I can match the frame, and I can match, make sure that the subject is exactly what it is. But I would write down what the camera settings were, all right? Because unlike today, none of that information was recorded with the print or on the negative, right? So I relied on that notebook for a lot of my learning process out in the field, all right? And one of the things that I found is, working digitally, there's the habit of kind of disregarding that whole aspect of, well, for one, slowing it down, all right? Get more into the moment, all right? And not so much, it's like, take 50 shots and hope one of them comes out, all right? Because that's just a waste of time. It's a waste of effort, where you can be using that time to get something else a different shot, a different perspective. All right. But if we have that cheat sheet for our workflow, then we can come back to it and repeat it. So, we come off the field, we sit down, all right, and we start editing. And, if you're editing blind, it says, okay, well, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that, and I'll just see where it goes. But if you actually write it down, okay, you can always come back and say, okay, here's a similar image that I want to edit. And two things are going to happen. All right. One, you're going to refresh your memory because you have it written down as to what you did to the previous image. And it doesn't have to be, every number on every slider. All right. You can just make general notes. So I did clarity for, I boosted it, or I dropped it, I added saturation here, whatever it is. Okay. And then you can start looking at it and it says, okay, well, I see where some of this is a little redundant. All right. But after a while, you get to see, oh, there are certain things that I'm always doing. Okay. That you may not have realized it, because when you're in the moment of editing, you're concentrating on getting some kind of result. And when you're first learning, you're not thinking about what did I do last time. You're thinking about what am I doing now. So by having that cheat sheet or those notes from the previous time, one, it's less guesswork as to what sliders does what, because you now have a reference of what you did last time. And you say, okay, on that image, I did this, and this. All right. So now you can just concentrate on those 4 little aspects for the new image. Okay. So it takes all that experimentation out of the equation. But after a while, you're going to see, oh, you know what? I do this, and this all the time. All right. And I've mentioned this in the past when we discussed building presets. After a while, I discovered that there were certain things that I did on every single image, and it became part of my workflow. And then after a while, it made sense to animate parts of that workflow. All right. But you can't animate that. All right. Or not animate, automate. You can't automate those processes unless you've identified it. Okay. All right. So when we discussed Photoshop actions, okay, I went down the list of a bunch of actions that I've collected from different sources that have worked out really, really well with my editing. Okay. And I analyzed that when I do, like, for example, when I do portraits, there are certain go-to actions that I launch each and every time. So I decided to take those, 4, I think it's like 4 or 5 actions, and I built an action to launch those 4 or 5 actions. So now all I have to do is launch one action that does pretty much my whole entire portrait editing workflow. So now I don't even have to think about, oh, what did I do last time? Because it's all right there in my layer stack. All I got to do is look down my layer stack and say, okay, well, here's my blemish removal. Here's my dodge and burn. Here's my skin softening. Okay. And here's my frequency separation. Here's my sharpening, and I'm done. Okay. And that right there can cut your time down by half just because you've automated a bunch of processes. But in the meantime, you've also removed a lot of the experimentation stuff where you're trying to figure out how to do things. All right? That floundering type of experimentation. Not that experimentation is a bad thing. I do recommend that you experiment. But when push comes to shove and time matters and you need to get a product out, that's not the time to experiment. Experiment when you have the time. Experiment when it doesn't matter. All right? But when it does matter, you want a workflow that's tried and true and gets you results. Okay? So anyway, that's what I had to say about, workflows is just write them down. All right? Keep track of them, and that way it'll help you become faster. It'll help you automate your process wherever you can, and it'll also help you establish a sort of consistency. So anyway, that's my little speech for the day. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for Q&A, whoever wants. Oh, wait. I do want to say I currently don't have anything scheduled as far as any special events, but spring is around the corner. All right. The warm weather, I don't know about you guys, but me personally, I tend to hibernate when it's cold outside. I don't like being out in the cold. Okay. But I am looking forward to the warm weather. Okay. So I know I do want to get some warm weather workshops going. I would like to do more workshops this year than I did last year. Obviously, it's going to be dependent on the situation and what the state regulations are in regards to COVID. But we are on the downslide, so. Which is a good thing. If there are any special events that you guys want to see me put together for you, please hit me up, email me, or private message me through Facebook, and we'll see if we can get something going. So anyway, that's what I had to say in regards to that. Okay? All right, let's open it up to your questions. Who's got questions on anything?
That's one of the first times you and I agree on something.
What's that?
Basically, the more you go through the process of both photography and post processing, you develop a set of tools.
Yes.
You know, you set of tools, and in turn, that lets me anyway, shoot a particular type of way with my wildlife and birds and nature and photography that I do. I mean, I have no problems now shooting with the highest ISOs that my camera will allow, because I've got the tools back in the darkroom to correct for that. Fred has seen some of my work on that end of it. So yeah, I totally agree with you. The more you go through this, you'll have more than one. I don't use Photoshop at all. I'm in Lightroom, and then I have 3 versions of Luminar that I can go to, and 4 or 5 different things from another product, all in my toolkit, if you will.
Yep.
And that everything in that toolkit, my post processing toolkit, I go out and take some chances that I probably shouldn't with shutter speeds, ISOs, f-stops, and so forth. That wouldn't necessarily be normal or correct, or for a correct exposure, or for something. I mean, I just want to get that shot.
Yeah.
Whether it's stopping the bird in flight or depth of field, and I'll correct everything else in post. But so I agree with you on that one, Doc.
Awesome. Yeah, but Yeah, and part of it is experience. Because I know when I first made the switch over to digital, I felt like a fish out of water with my photography. It was like learning photography all over again. Obviously, there were some awesome things about it. The fact that I could look at the back of the camera and see my exposure and the composition. But as far as the menu settings and how RAW behaved and what you could and couldn't push was just so foreign. And then, I knew very little about photo editing and Photoshop at the time, so learning that whole process, that was completely foreign as well, and now, with time and experience and guidance from others, I've been able to, like you said, build your toolbox. And you're always going to be building that toolbox. All right. I've been doing photography, digital photography since 2007, and I'm still learning stuff, so the learning's never going to end, and the modification's never going to end. All right. But the one thing, you did mention something that kind of resonated, is that the more you learn what you can do, you kind of alluded to the fact that, suddenly some of the things that you avoided previously, you're now, quote unquote, taking those risks. All right. Which, in my opinion, that's an awesome thing. All right. Because if you can step out of your comfort zone, it could open up all new avenues for your photography that you may have just been blocking yourself. You're, like they say, you're your own worst enemy. Okay. And I find it interesting. There was a discussion about judges and judging competitions, is that sometimes those judges are probably their own worst enemies because they have these preconceived ideas of what photography should be, without realizing that, it's not so clear cut with the rules.
We are creators in a certain extent. We are creators. So sometimes with those judges, I don't participate in those types of things anymore. Okay, they're all fine and dandy. If anybody wants to do it, that's great. But for me, I'm shooting for myself or for the people that like the types of things that I take pictures of or how I process them. So, but yeah.
Yeah, like you, I have a love-hate relationship with competitions.
Yeah.
I just joined PPA, and they are big on competitions as far as, I guess you can call it as proof that you know what you're doing. So in order to get, your accreditation for master photographer, you got to enter a certain number of competitions, and obviously peer review, if done properly, can't hurt. Okay, it can kind of point out where those areas that you can improve on are, that you might be blind to. So I can see some benefits to it, but to prove to somebody that I know how to shoot, I don't need to prove it to you. I just need to prove it to my clients.
That's right.
So that's where I kind of, but if I want that accreditation, I got to put up with the process. We'll see what happens. I'm a bit of a stubborn person that way, so.
Yeah, and with these master organizations, I belong to the NAMPA, which is a North American nature photographer. For the nature wildlife stuff, it's the portrait stuff. But it's the same type of thing. I mean, these contests have thousands of entries from around the world, including professional biologists who have excellent cameras, and no way am I going to get their shot.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. But I don't participate in those kind of contests anyway.
Yeah.
They do have a point. They do have a place, but not for me.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Anybody else got any questions?
All right, Doug, I got one.
All righty.
As you know, I have a very limited skill level. And a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about, you were talking about Lightroom. And we were talking about a little bit about photo stacking. I go, I could do that. After I didn't realize how many photographs could be shot in a second. I use Olympus, and I have up to 100. I used 100, not knowing. So I'm in Lightroom, and I know there's a way, and I could figure out anything, but I didn't want to spend the time.
Right.
So I figured there's a perfect time to ask someone who already knows, and I could cut myself 2 hours of trying to dig it out. So I shot 7 frames, 5 photographs, 7 frames. But in Lightroom, I have all 7 frames. I was actually under the illusion that they stack themselves. No, they don't stack themselves.
Right.
What do I do, or where do I find that?
Okay, so I just need to clarify a few things, and one is your definition of photo stacking, because photo stacking can mean a couple different things depending on what it is that you're trying to do.
I'm glad you said that, because I understand I can stack it in camera or stack it in Photoshop.
All right. So stacking means one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other.
Right.
All right. You're not talking about panorama, right?
No.
Okay. So photo stacking is typically done for one of two things. For either expanding your exposure range, so you have HDR stacking, okay, and then you have stacking for expanding your depth of field, which is focus stacking. So which one of those?
Focus stacking.
Focus stacking, okay. Focus stacking is not done in Lightroom. It's done in Photoshop, okay? However, what I normally suggest to people is you're going to want to do a certain amount of prep work in Lightroom, okay? Which is easier to do in Lightroom than it is to try to handle it in Photoshop. And that is your color correcting, your exposure correcting, things like that, okay? Because you can do batch processing in Lightroom a lot easier than you can in Photoshop. Okay.
You mean by batch processing?
All right. So you said you have what, seven images?
5 images, 7 images of each image.
Okay. So I'll do a generic example. All right. You have 10 images that you shot that you want to stack. Okay. And you notice that maybe 1 or 2 look a little bit darker than the others. All right. Either a cloud passed over, or, the camera was shooting so fast that, something somewhere along the line went wrong and it captured the wrong exposure. Maybe you're a third of a stop off. but it's enough that when you're looking at all the images in the Lightroom gallery, you say, ooh, this one's dark and that one's dark. Okay. So what you can do is you can go ahead and take those two dark ones and lighten them up. And what I mean by batch is that as long as those two dark ones are selected, all you got to do is adjust one and the other one gets adjusted automatically. All right, because they're kind of linked. Okay. And then you say, okay, here it is. The color is straight out of camera. I want to change the color profile to, let's say, Adobe Color. Okay. So now you select all the images, all 10 images. You're editing the first one, but that edit is going to translate to all 10 images. So you change the color profile for that first image, all 10 images, change that profile. All right. You say, okay, I want to boost the blues or mute down the reds, whatever it is you want to do. Okay. You do it to that first image and it's going to take that setting and translate it to all 10 images. All right. So that's what I mean by batch processing. Okay. Because if you're to do that in Photoshop, you would either have to go through the Photoshop's batch processor, which is kind of clunky, all right? Or you would have to open up or go to each one of those files, make the change before you stack them, which is a big pain in the ass, okay? So doing any kind of batch editing is easier in Lightroom, okay? Once all your batch editing is done, at that point, you can tell Lightroom to open up the entire 10 images as a stack, all right? So the way to do that, let me switch over to the desktop, okay? So all you got to do is, let me check. I'm just going to select first forward. You right click and you're going to say edit in, okay? And then that little pop out one, the top one, it says go ahead and edit it in Adobe Photoshop. But if you have multiples, all right, so if you have your 10 images selected, you're going to go all the way to the bottom and it says open as layers in Photoshop. Open as layers, okay? And when you do that, it's going to take a few minutes, but it's going to place each one of those images into its own layer in a single document. All right? Then from there, you can go into your focus stacking workflow. So the first thing would be to make sure that they're all aligned and then go ahead and do your focus stacking. Okay?
Oh, thank you.
Does
Makes
that
so much more sense?
Yeah.
I was in the wrong area. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Doc, I have a question.
Sure.
In Photoshop, where is the tool for frequency separation?
I actually have a script for frequency separation. Okay. An action, I should say. Okay. Frequency separation is a bit of a process. It's multiple steps because what you're doing is actually, let me go ahead and open up. Let me open up a image here. Come on. Edit in Photoshop. Can you see my screen okay, or do you want me to share?
Share it if you don't mind.
Share it?
So
Okay.
it's kind of little.
Share. All right, hold on a second. Let me switch over. Where is my, oh, Windows projector? Share. Okay. And then Photoshop. There we go. Whoa, what the heck? That's not what I wanted. That's what I want. Where it?
Is this in your new computer yet?
No, not yet. Where is my Photoshop? There it is.
Oh, there you
Oh, my Photoshop is still loading. That's why. My new computer comes tomorrow.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I cannot wait. All right, reading camera raw. There we go. Okay. So frequency separation, what frequency separation does is it separates the color from the texture. Okay? So the way Lightroom looks at it is the low frequency is all your color information. The high frequency is your texture information. Okay? So it's a great way of, for example, smoothing out colors without really affecting the texture too much, or vice versa, manipulating the texture without destroying the underlying color information. Okay. For example, it can be used as a way of doing skin blemish touch-ups. I use it for removing like heavy-duty wrinkles. Okay. All right. So I have a frequency separation action that I run. Okay. And the way it's done is you're going to create 2 copies. All right. So one's going to be your low frequency and one's going to be your high frequency. Okay. And for the low frequency, let's see. All right, so I'm gonna do this. LF for low frequency, HF for high frequency. Okay, so I have 3 layers. I have my original, which I'm just going to keep in reserve just in case. All right, because the other 2 layers, it's a destructive process. It's going to destroy the original image. So you always want to make a copy. All right, so the low frequency is nothing more than a Gaussian blur. So that's fairly easy. So Gaussian blur, all right? But the trick here is when you apply the Gaussian blur, you have to be careful with how much blur you cause here, all right? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to remove the fine detail, okay? So you're going to put enough of a blur, all right, so that it's kind of like if you're squinting at something with your looking at something, you're squinting with your eyes, it kind of gets rid of that detail, and all you're doing is seeing like shapes and blobs of color. Same process. All right. So what we're going to do is, just remove all the detail. All right. So for example, the side of the bridge, you can see all these slats. Okay. You can see the individual slats. Excuse me. And the reason we can see it is because there's an interplay between the true tone color, which is the red, and the shadow color in between the slats, which cause it to be, a darker red to black. Okay. Once we apply some Gaussian blur, that detail of the planking goes away. So what you want to do is you want to find that sweet spot, and each image is going to be slightly different. And the size of your image is also going to play an effect, all right? But usually anywhere between, 4 and 8 pixels is enough to do it, okay? If you go too much, you kind of start getting a halo, all right? All right, so I'm gonna do 4. No, I'm gonna do 5. Let's do 5. All right, and I'm gonna say okay. All right, and now if I zoom in, I can probably even do a little bit more. Let's go.
Doc,
Yes.
did you do that to the whole photograph?
The whole entire image.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Whole entire image. Okay.
Yep, thank you.
All right. So I'm getting rid of all that fine detail. All right. So now if we look at the roof of the bridge, it's just this light brown. The side of the bridge is a red. All right. So we're seeing just the blobs of color. All right. I'm going to go ahead and turn the layer above it, which is going to become my high frequency. And that we're going to do an apply image. All right. So we go up. Let's see if I can remember how to do this, because once I built my action, I didn't have to do it. Where is it? Image, apply image. Okay. Image, apply image. And here, let me get my notes out here. Okay. Image, apply image. All right. And we're going to do a calculations here. So the source is going to be, let's see. Oh, I can't even remember how to do this. Oh, calculations. There it is. Calculations. That's what we want. Not apply image. Calculations. Okay. The source one is going to be your image. Source 2 is going to be the same image. All right. The layer is going to be merged. Grayscale. Let's see. I'm going by memory and I can't remember. I believe it's grayscale. The blending is going to be subtract. Okay. What is it? Low frequency. There we go. Low frequency and high frequency. All right. We're going to do a subtract. The scale is going to be 1. And the offset, all right, we have 256 points of gray. All right. 0 being black and 255 being white. Okay. Middle gray is 128. All right. And that's basically what we're going to be using. The end result is going to be a layer blend between our high frequency and our low frequency. So in order to take advantage of that layer blend, we want to make sure that we are using middle gray as our break point. Okay, for that texture. Okay. So offset's going to be 128. Okay. And I think the new channel. All right. And we're going to say okay. All right. And then the See, I can't even remember how to do this. The current. I should probably just run the action, right? Here, hold on. Let me delete this. Action, frequency, say play. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is the Gaussian blur, okay? And again, we're going to get rid of all our detail, all right? So about 8 pixels does it right. Then we're going to do our high frequency, okay? Which has already done it, but I want to see if we can show you. Image, calculations, all right? So it's going to do the merged layer, all right, with our low frequency, all right? Offset 128, scale at 1, okay? And the results is going to be a new channel. And we say, okay, all right? And that's going to get you that, see how it looks gray? Okay. Oh, what happened? My image is stuck here. What happened? I'm stuck. There we go. I'm stuck. Oh, there we go. Come on. Boy, nothing's working for me today. I'm in my annotation and I can't get out of my annotation now. I can annotate to my heart's content and I can't get out of my annotation. Let's see. There we go. All right. And what that's going to do is it's going to create this gray, nasty looking whatchamacallit, layer, okay? And as you can see, there's no color detail in this thing. All this is texture, all right? And the texture is based on how far from that middle gray it is, okay? So because it is that middle gray, we need to allow this texture layer to blend with the layer below it, right? And the layer blend that we need is, what was it? Linear light. Linear light. So as soon as we click on linear light, you'll notice that the image looks normal. All right, image looks normal. All right, although it's made up with 2 different layers. Okay, I have, let me get a solid color here, make it white. I'm going to put that in between the 2. All right, so that's my high frequency layer with the linear light applied, okay, over that white, okay. And if I take it off and put it below this is my low frequency, which is just blur, okay. But when combined together, it looks like a normal image. So now what I can do is I can edit either one of those without destroying any kind of texture. So I can take, for example, I'm going to go ahead and take let's make a blue, I'm going to get a blue brush, all right? Let me get a blank layer here. Okay, blue. All right. And make it 100%. All right, so this is my brush, okay? All it is painting blue, right? Okay. If I go to my underlying low frequency and paint that blue in, notice how it retains all the structure of the detail. All right, so if I want to change the color of something without destroying all that tonality, I can do that very, very, very quickly and easily. All right, so this is a powerful tool, for example, for skin retouching. If somebody has, spotty skin with, areas of blotchiness, either like from rosacea or something, you can sample a nearby color, all right, by using the Alt or your Option key if you're on a Mac. All right, just take that color, all right, and you can apply it in the area. And fix whatever blemishes. All right, so you can see how this can be very, very powerful. So now I can really even out the tones. All right, see the you can see the reds just evening out there. Okay, you can use it like I did here to recolor something. All right, although there's probably easier ways to recolor than this, but this is an option. Okay, so you can see how you can really manipulate something here. All right, you can say, all right, I'm just going to let me get a dark color and put graffiti. All right, so there's a lot of things that can be done with just working on the color layer. Okay, now the frequency layer is a little bit trickier, because depending on what you're looking at, like for example, the texture on the bridge, all right, and the texture on the slats, okay, if I take a brush and I have a middle gray, all right, so middle gray is 50% gray, all right, I can erase all that texture. Okay. Why would you erase texture? Probably you wouldn't. All right, because as you can see now, it looks flat. There's absolutely no texture here. However, in combination with like the clone stamp tool, okay, all right, I can now take and put a window right there, all right, if I wanted to. Okay, I can correct certain things. All right, oops, let me go here. All right. Very, very, very easily fix problems in an image. Okay. And this is a great tool for those of you who do compositing, because, or like for example, Alan, if you do your nature photography and you come across something that is there, maybe a dumpster, you know, that you just, oh man, I wish that was gone. Okay. And it's an awkward situation where, you know, the normal clone stamp is making the texture look too repetitive. Here's a great way of being able to just manipulate the texture differently from the color so that it doesn't look repetitive. All right. Again, you can use it to fix blemishes. All right. And all kinds of good stuff. Okay. So anyway, that is frequency separation in a nutshell. I suggest you look at Pix and Perfect's tutorial on frequency separation, because he walks you through every single step to create the action. All right. And trust me, once you have an action, you're not even going to bother remembering how to do it. You just, like you saw me struggling, because I don't bother. I have the action. I don't need to remember all those little steps. Okay. But anyway, that is, yeah. Question?
No, that's good. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Hopefully I didn't confuse you too much.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
But because I know frequency separation requires a lot of steps, and in product photography we use it a lot to clean food, to clean glasses.
Certain things there's a benefit, yes. But I find a lot of times I can get away with just spot removal in the healing brush. You know, where frequency separation works wonders with product photography is in metallic surfaces. Brushed metals is very, very, very difficult to do with spot healing or clone stamp. All right, because with the like, for example, the brushed metals, you have a gradation from like just on a surface. Let's say you're photographing a watch, and there's that slight curve of the surface, okay? And so that slight curve catches the light a little bit different on the back side than the front side. So you have shadow towards the back side and the front side, okay? But if there's like a little indent in the metal on the edge where it was stamped and it just kind of did a little bit of a wave, you're going to notice that gradation has a ripple in it, okay? But on top of that, you have the texture of the brushing, which is a mechanical process which scratches the surface. All right. If you were to try to replace something from another part of the watch to fix that little ripple of color, all right, you're going to find that suddenly you're destroying that whole texture effect of the brushing. Okay, so being able to separate the two, you can now go in and mask that whole little section and say, you know what, I'm just going to create my own gradient. All right, and then you just color pick from the dark and color pick from the light, create your nice gradient underneath that preserved texture, and wow, you have a flawless piece of metal. You know, so, but I don't know. On glass, I tend to go with spot removal and clone stamping, just because it's easier. You know, depending on usually, well, you'll find the fingerprints more in a piece of glass that has a solid color gradient behind it, not necessarily something that's got texture. So if there's liquids, if there's ice already in the glass, you're not really going to see fingerprints. You may see dust particles. You may see a blemish of some type, which I find it's easier to replace with clone stamp and or healing brush over those areas, because they're very minor. I can get in within just a couple of pixels for that. Okay, and in that case, what I normally do is I create a check layer. I went over check layers previously. I don't know if you were available for check layers. All right. Here's a piece I'm working on currently. All right, share. All right, and desktop. Oops, come on, where's my, there we go. All right, so this has already been cleaned up. All right, let me see if I can, all right. But if I wanted to do any kind of spot removal, what I normally do is I have an action that does spot removal. All right, and it's a simple one, and all it is a let me put it, of course, over the top of everything else. Come on. Of course, I put it at the bottom of my stack where it should be at the top of my stack. Let's go to the top of the stack. Try that again. Spot removal.
Spot removal applies to the whole image.
Applies to everything below it. All right, because all it is a curves adjustment layer. Curves adjustment. All right. And the way it works is you're just basically mixing up. See how it makes kind of like this letter M or letter W? That's all you're doing, is just creating points, stretching up. You're taking the dark shadows and you're brightening them. Taking the mid-tone shadows and darkening them and brightening them up. You're really stretching the shadows and the highlights in weird ways. Okay, and what this does is it kind of creates a pseudo solarized like image. Okay, and what it's doing is it's exaggerating the contrast between light and shadows. Okay, because we're going to extreme ends. We're really pushing brights and really pushing shadows all in the wrong places. All right, so wherever there is a transition from bright to dark, it's going to create more of a contrast. All right, so like for example, right there's a little whoops, there's a little blemish right here. Let me go to my spot removal tool. All right, and I can just, oh, be nice if I went to my radio. You got to make sure that you're on the right layer when you do your touch-ups. There's my handset. Gone. Okay. There's a slight blemish there. All right, like I said, I've already gone and cleaned this up a lot. All right.
So this setting basically allows you to see the spots.
It really showcases spots.
Am I reading
all right.
this correct?
So yeah, unfortunately, this one here has been really cleaned up. considerably. But all right, so here's the texture in the plastic. All right, there's a lot of texture. All right, so there's a lot of quote unquote blemishes, right, that really stand out. Okay, but notice that the difference between the color, all right, because we're shifting our colors here. Notice the difference here between the dark blue and the light blue. We are still within that blue range. So that means that it's got a very low contrast with its surroundings. Okay. Whereas if we look at the blue and the yellow, that's a higher contrast. Okay. But this is not indicating that there's spots. This is just indicating that there's a luminosity contrast here. All right. Where we see the spots is, oh, right here. Little one right there, little one right there. Okay. So what I normally do is I will put this on to see where I'm at. All right. And then I'll turn it off just to double check. And it says, oh yeah, I can go ahead and remove those spots. Okay. So I will, one, make sure that you are on the correct layer. Where's my my cables? Did I put it with my cables? Oh, it's my antenna. That's my antenna cable. There we go. You got to know your layer stacks. Antenna. Oh, what the hell? Here it is. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. And I can check the rest of the cable. It looks pretty good. Maybe a little one there. All right. Turn it off. And all those spots are gone. Okay. So that's just a great way of checking. Here's a little one there. You know, you can get, oh no, that's, all right. Here's a spot right here. There's a spot. All right. But you have to be careful because you got to know what it is that you're looking at. All right. And again, a little bit of experience comes into play. This may look like a spot right up here, but if I turn this off, that's actually a little arrow that's in the plastic. Okay. So you got to be careful. Right now, remember what I said, that difference between the dark blue and the light blue here and the like green, right? If I turn that check layer off, that's the texture. All right. The texture is spotted. So obviously this does not need cleaning up because a spotted texture is exactly what it is. All right. But it allows you to really, you know, just point out, you know, areas. Okay. Another one that I like to use is very similar. It's also a spot detection tool. I'll show you here, but I usually mostly for faces, but it's also very helpful for products. And that's my skin blemish tool. All right. And this one uses the hue saturation layer. And all it is you take the reds and you bring it all the way to the left as far as it'll go. Okay. Some people even take a little bit of the green, right? And now you can see that it's turned my image kind of black and white here. Basically what it's done is it's just darkened my red layer. Okay. And that allows you to see some blemishes, right? The reason this is called a skin blemish is because there's a lot of red in skin, all right? But here you can see, let me close this up. You can see those spots, bright as day. They're obvious right there. Can you see them? I don't know if they come across on the screen, okay?
Very clearly.
All right. Let me see my annotation tool works. All right. Oh, zoomed in too much. Zoomed in. All right, let me get my brush tool. One. Let me go to.
You can use sample brush.
All right,
you
hold on.
brush
So
to sample the color with the image. Just click it and sample it, and then you just.
yeah. So let me go to the correct layer. You got to make sure you're on the correct layer. All right. When you're using multiple layers, normally I will keep this. I won't keep this all the way at the top. I'll keep it one layer up from the layer I'm working on. All right. So I don't lose track of where I'm at. All right. So here's the layer I'm at. Okay. And then right above it, I have my check layer. All right. So that way, as I'm working on this layer, I can just toggle it on and off. All right. Now you can see those kind of very bright spots. All right. I'm just going to do a quick bright spot, and then a couple of dark spots here. All right. If I turn that check layer off, you notice that those bright spots are very, very light, almost imperceptible. All right. But those dark spots are very clearly visible. Okay. But sometimes you'll be working on something and you'll be working fairly quickly, and those little things may pass by you. By having a layer that really points them out, then you can go ahead and do your cleanup. So here I would just grab my spot healing brush tool. Click, click, click. Hit them. All right. And because, the surrounding texture is pretty flat, I don't need to be too concerned about getting into trouble. All right. I also am very comfortable using my spot healing brush tool directly on the image. So I'm actually working destructively. Okay. So this allows me, see, look at all these, all right? All these blemishes that are almost imperceptible. Okay. All right, so now let me grab that other check layer, bring it down. I'll toggle this one off and that one on. Okay. You can see how, because the contrast of these spots are so low, it's almost not visible with this check layer. Okay. You can see some of them here. Oops, let me go. Some of them are visible here. All right, so I can go in and whatever is visible, I can go ahead and clean up here. All right, but switching between the two, all right, sometimes you might even stack them both. I find this tends to be a little bit too confusing at times. All right, I don't do this too often, but sometimes it helps. All right. But again, you have to know what it is you're looking at. All right. And if you're not sure if that's a spot or not, turn those layers off and say, oh yeah, that's a hole in the plate. All right. But see this area right here, how nice it looks? As soon as I turn that on, I can see all these little spots. All right. So it all depends on how much retouching a particular piece needs. All right. And then you turn it off and you're good to go. All right. Okay. So hopefully that'll help.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You know, because sometimes it's nice to have that second pair of eyes, and this kind of becomes that second pair of eyes. All right. It shows you something that may not be readily visible. Okay. All right. So my product check layer is nothing more than a curves adjustment with this crazy W. All right. Very easy to replicate. All right. So what I suggest is, you know, start recording your action, then just click on curves adjustment, move these points up and down. All right. It's going to give you that crazy result. All right. And then that's all you have to do. You stop the action, give it a name, and you always have this to go to. All right. The other one is a black and white adjustment. All right. And we're just playing around with the hue and the hues on the reds. All right. I suggest building this when you have a person open up as a layer. All right. And you're going to take the reds all the way to the left. You might want to play around with, you know, the other colors. All right. And just, again, record it. It's very simple. You just bring the reds over, maybe adjust these, you know, a touch here and there, and stop recording, and then you have that saved. All right. The nice thing about this particular one is depending on the skin tone. So if you're working on somebody with darker skin tone, somebody who's like really, really dark, you're not going to have the reds all the way over. So all you do is just come up to the properties and you bring that red slider back until you see the imperfections come forward. All right. Anybody want to see what that actually looks like? I can load a portrait. Anybody interested or not?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Since we're here.
Since we're here. All right, let me... All right, load up. I'm going to load up portrait I did a while back. Can't wait for my new machine.
Actually, I'm on the same boat. Yesterday, I was working on my laptop. Suddenly, my software just couldn't upload. I'm like, oh my God. So it was like, and I reloaded, I cleaned up my Mac,
Okay, why isn't this?
rebooted it, and it didn't upload. And I kept telling Derek, and I'm in trouble. And I had 3 iMacs, and out of the 3, I couldn't make one. Because the other
Oh,
two,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I can also, they cannot handle the software anymore.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even go there. I am in so much trouble. And then I close it, I let it go, and then I turn it on again, and now it's working. But
Yep.
now I have this ding, ding, ding red light that I say, I think I need to upgrade. I need to upgrade. My machine is probably 15 years
Yeah.
old already.
Every
So
time, every time I load Photoshop into this machine, it gives me an error message saying that my my graphics processor is no longer useful. Okay, so here's a portrait. All right. I've run this action in the past, and every time I run it, I always give the warning. All right, don't do this in front of your clients. You're gonna scare them. All right. So we can see, a lot of information here, just in the normal layer. All right, but let's say you're doing some retouching, and you want to get rid of obviously you want to get rid of all the temporary blemishes. All right, pimples and things like that. What you're not seeing here are a lot of the subsurface blemishes that are sometimes prevalent in skin tones. All right, blood vessels, sunspots, things like that. Simply because the contrast is so slight. All right, kind of showed you that with the products. But as soon as we launch a skin blemish action, all right, and this is where you're going to go ahead and bring your red slider back. Okay, soon as we run that action, we can see some imperfections. All right, you can see it right here. There's a little something right under her eye. If I turn that off, it's barely perceptible. Okay, as soon as I turn it on, that's loud and clear. There's another one right here. I've already gone ahead and edited this, to a certain extent in Lightroom, but I really didn't run any. So you can see these little spots on the cheek, on the tip of the nose. Okay, if we go up here, there's a blemish there. There's a blemish there. Okay. All this does, there's a blemish right there. All this does is it really highlights them. Oh, here we go. All these blemishes right here on the chin. Okay. And this allows us to go ahead and clean up. Now, if there are only a few spots, I'll do them right on the layer. Like I mentioned before, I have no problems running my spot removal tool right on my layer. If there are a lot of spots, okay, which is usually the case with skin retouching, I'll create a new layer and I'll call that spot removal. Okay. And then now I can take my spot healing brush, make sure that sample all layers is active at the top. I make mine content aware, and then all I got to do is just come in and clean up these little spots that, this layer just kind of highlights, makes them very, very obvious. All right. And of course, you're going to spend time doing a nice cleanup on the skin tone. All right, and this is just to remove blemishes. If there are spots due to like rosacea, that's something completely different that you would use a different tool for that. This is just to get rid of like little spots. Large pores, okay? That's where you want to come in and, do a little bit of cleanup. You don't want to get rid of all the pores. You just want to get rid of, all the large pores that, really stand out. Same thing goes with wrinkles. You don't want to get rid of all the wrinkles. You just want to get rid of the minor wrinkles, maybe. All right. Give it a little bit of tweezing here around the eyebrows. Okay. All right. And this layer just really highlights all those imperfections that you normally, if I turn it off, you know, it's a little bit harder to see. Okay. And that's how that works. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody? All right, let's go ahead and stop share. Go back to chat. Any questions? No? Okay. All right, guys. It was a pleasure hanging out with you. Thank you for joining me once again. Hopefully you walked away with a little bit more knowledge than you did when you first came in at the beginning of the session. Again, warm weather's coming up. Sorry, Lehia, unless you make a trip up to Connecticut, you know, the live workshops are going to be out of your realm. All right. But so the one thing in regards to workshops, the one thing that I do want to do once I get the new machine here is I want to put these cameras to use where I'm actually doing workshops, you know, live from the studio. One of the tools that I'm thinking of putting into effect is Twitch. I'm looking to start streaming whenever I have a job. You know, right now I still have the remains of the radio on my table. You can see the handset. I got to reshoot that. But what I'm looking to do is whenever I get a job, I'm probably going to start live streaming it. And I'm going to be giving notification on Facebook saying, hey, you know, I got this job. I'm going to be in the studio. I'm hanging out. I'm going to live stream. And if you want to join me, you can join me. If not, you know, the video becomes available for, I think, like 12 days after it's streamed, and then they remove it from their platform. So I'm going to play around with that, see if there's any interest. All right. If anything, you just can hang out, watch how I do things. You can ask questions and interact. Obviously, it's through chat. It's not like Zoom here, but we'll see what happens. Okay. All right, guys.
That will be fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. You know, try something new. All right.
Well, interesting.
Yeah.
It's a win-win for me. Every day, everything I hear is new to me.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Does anybody work with models? Anybody? Sometimes Fred, you do? Yeah. I've been working with models a little bit more lately. I just did a photo shoot. I used the same model for two jobs, so I saved myself some money that way. But you know, I've always been wondering if there was any need for tutorials on how to work with models, you know, and so if anybody's interested.
Well, I don't work with models, but I work with actors.
Same.
And
yeah.
I sometimes have to go in and take their pictures.
Okay. All right. Well, directing people is still directing people, whether it's a model or an actor or, you know, a business person. So, all right. I'll keep that on the back of the mind. We'll see what comes of it. Okay. All right, guys, stay safe. We'll catch you not next week, but the week after.
Thanks,
all right.
Doc.
Take care, guys.
Thank you,
Enjoy.
Doc. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.